Once we sprayed the final clear coat on the Lose Change Camaro, we decided to wet sand that to take out any imperfections that you might have in the clear coat. It's a common practice. It's the way you get a clear finish to look like a mirror, you know, super flat. And in this case, we spent some time with some 1000 grit sandpaper, 1200 grit sandpaper, even up to 2000 and 2500 grit as traditional wet sandpaper on a small series of wooden blocks or actual paint sticks, where we wrap the paper around a paint stick to sand those little hard to reach details. And then after that, the process goes even finer using what's called the 3M Trizact System, which puts a 3000 and 5000 grit sandpaper on a orbital pneumatic sanding machine. It's like a mini BA sander. And it's pretty amazing to think that something as fine as 5000 grit can even be made, you know, but it's just a couple steps basically before polishing. And the reason why we do that is it makes the polish phase go much faster. The car turns very shiny with less effort with a buffer when it's been refined to that 5000 grit. The process was going very well, except during the sanding process, we noticed by scrutinizing the finish that there were some very tiny black dots on certain parts of the car. And we weren't quite sure what these little black dots were. Maybe they were some overspray from touching up the black stripes before we cleared it. Maybe an air hose came apart and was deteriorating and it left little things in the paint, but at any rate, we couldn't have them. So we didn't really want to go back into the paint process on the car, but we wanted to make it right. So we resprayed some of the orange and then cleared it all again. And then we got back into our wet sand process. Now typically you paint the car, you let it dry, you wet sand the car, and then you buff the car, and then it's finished. But when you do a show car that has a lot of different substrates and many coats of paint, a lot of clear, you want to make sure that those products have had adequate time to harden. So in our case, once we wet sanded everything, we resisted the urge to buff it right away and allowed everything to settle down and cure. And during this time period, we did a little bit of the reassembly, but we actually took the time to bring the car to the dyno shop.
A lot of times when you do a custom paint job on a car, you put a lot of layers of material on it between the body filler, the primer, the color, the stripes, and eventually the clear. But all that takes a lot of time to dry. But there's not a lot we can do in the paint department when that's going on. So we took the time on Lose Change to run it to the dyno and do some work on the tune. The car was not complete when we took it to the dyno. We'd done a few other things. We'd run it to the upholstery shop so they could put the headliner in. It's always easier for them to do the headliner when both the front and rear windshields are not installed. They also needed to work on the rear seat to fit around our Detroit Speed Quadrolink rear suspension parts. They also went ahead and made a custom carpet for us to fit over the tunnel that fit our CTSV bell housing and T56 Magnum transmission. But that's about all we had inside the car. So I was sitting on the floor, you know, driving like an old lady, looking over the steering wheel on the dyno. The other thing we made sure to do before we ran to the dyno was put the Dakota Digital VHX instrument panel in the car so we could keep a close eye on the vital functions of the LSA engine, our temperature, our oil pressure, and most importantly our tach when you're at the dyno, so we can make sure we're running the engine consistently for our data. The engine we're running in Lose Change is a LSA, which is what comes in Camaro ZL1s, but this one wasn't stock. It started out as a GM crate motor, but the owner had a friend of his install a aftermarket cam and a pulley to increase supercharger boost. And then when it was installed in the car, we put on a set of Detroit speed headers, and Adam made us a custom intake tube. All these changes necessitated tuning so that the engine would run properly under all conditions. This particular car was running a GM factory ECM. In that case, we use HP tuners, which allows you to modify factory ECMs to suit just about anything you could do to a factory-based engine.